A sleek black SUV rolls to a stop under the glaring streetlights. Doors burst open. A well-dressed man, confident, powerful, a billionaire by every measure, steps out. The crowd surges around him, cameras flashing. He walks with impatience, urgency in every stride. Then he freezes. Across the crowd, on the cracked sidewalk, sits a little girl, 10 years old, dirty, shivering, clutching a cardboard sign. "Please help me get home." A stranger drops $1 into her cup. She doesn't look up. Then, something pulls her head up. Her eyes, wide with confusion, flick up through the swirl of elbows and coats and lock on him. The man's breath catches. The girl whispers, barely audible, "Daddy, you finally found me?" Cut to black. How does a girl born with silver spoons end up begging on a street corner like a lost orphan? And how could her own father stand just feet away and not know she was there? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Alexander Ward built a world most people only see in magazines. A penthouse overlooking the city, a tech company shaping the future, a reputation that made investors lean forward when he spoke. But behind closed doors, his world was quieter than anyone imagined. After losing his wife 3 years earlier, silence settled into every corner of their home. His daughter, Lila, became the center of everything he had left, the one thread holding him steady. He tried to give her the childhood his late wife had planned. Weekend pancakes, bedtime stories, piano lessons. But his attention was pulled constantly into meetings, crises, deadlines. And in that gap, in that vulnerable stretch between father and child, someone else stepped in. Someone who smiled warmly, spoke softly, and came highly recommended. Clara, the new nanny who appeared to be exactly what the family needed. And exactly what Alexander should have questioned. At first, Clara blended seamlessly into their lives. She prepared Lila's lunches, braided her hair before school, and left notes reminding Alexander of the little things he tended to forget. He trusted her quickly, too quickly. And Megan, the family assistant of 12 years, noticed the shift. Megan had seen Alexander at his lowest and watched Lila cling to whatever comfort she could find. So she expected to feel relief when another adult stepped in to help, but something unsettled her. Lila grew quieter, meals she once enjoyed untouched, a stiffness in her shoulders when Clara entered the room. Megan asked gentle questions, the kind that usually opened Lila up, but the little girl just forced a smile and said she was tired. Alexander brushed off Megan's concerns, telling her Lila was still grieving, still adjusting, still growing. And while he raced between boardrooms, Clara settled deeper into the household, unnoticed and unchallenged. The first real sign something was wrong appeared in something so small, it nearly went unnoticed. Megan was organizing Lila's desk when she found a folded document tucked beneath a stack of drawings. It wasn't a child's note. It was a printed form needing a guardian signature, something no nanny should have. No explanation, no reason it should be hidden. Megan took a photo and slipped the paper back exactly as she found it, a knot tightening in her stomach. Later that week, she checked Lila's smartwatch, the one Alexander insisted she wear, the one with a GPS tracker meant to keep her safe. The tracker was missing, cleanly removed, no damage, no explanation. And with Alexander too distracted to see the pieces shifting around him, Megan realized she might be the only person who sensed something changing in that home, something that threatened the only family he had left. Clara's shift from helpful nanny to quiet gatekeeper happened so gradually that Alexander didn't notice at first. She controlled Lila's schedule, answered for her during simple questions, and redirected phone calls from Megan with excuses that sounded practiced, yet harmless. Lila stopped wandering into her father's home office the way she used to, no longer asking for help with homework or showing him her drawings. Instead, she spent long hours alone with Clara behind closed doors. Alexander assumed this meant she was adjusting well, forming a bond he had hoped she would. But the truth was far from comforting. Lila's smiles faded, her shoulders curled in, her voice softened to a whisper, and without anyone realizing it, the distance between father and daughter stretched just enough for Clara to wedge herself in fully, quietly ensuring that every emotional door Lila tried to open led only back to her. Megan, more attentive than anyone else in the house, caught the first unmistakable sign something was deeply wrong on a Friday morning rush to get Lila ready for school. As she helped tie the girl's shoes, her sleeve slipped back just enough to reveal a faint bruise on her wrist. Not a fall, not an accident, a grip. Firm, deliberate. Startled, she asked softly what happened, giving Lila a moment to speak freely. The girl's eyes lowered, and she whispered, "I bumped into a table." The explanation was thin, fragile, and something in the way Lila's hands trembled made Megan's chest tighten. When she brought it up to Alexander later that day, he sighed heavily, exhausted from negotiations and meetings, and told her Lila was being clumsy lately. His words didn't match the fear in Megan's gut, but Clara, overhearing, stepped in with a gentle laugh, insisting she had seen it happen. Whether he realized it or not, he chose convenience over concern. What Megan didn't know yet was that the danger wasn't only emotional, it was financial. While Clara acted nurturing, she slowly gained access to parts of the household she had no business touching. Small daily withdrawals went unnoticed. $200 here, $300 there. Nothing alarming enough to trigger bank alerts or raise suspicion from someone as preoccupied as Alexander. But over time, the pattern grew. Passwords Clara claims she needed for household expenses somehow led her into private accounts. Transfers appeared with labels that meant nothing. Meanwhile, a neighbor knocked on Megan's door one afternoon saying they heard a child crying in the Ward household late at night. Crying that didn't sound like a nightmare, but like someone begging softly to be left alone. Megan tried again to voice her concern. Alexander tried again to brush it off. Clara, always ready with timing too perfect to be a coincidence, would arrive with Lila at her side, calm and composed, using Lila's silence as proof nothing was wrong. And over the next week, Alexander felt torn in a way that left him awake at night. He blamed himself for missing piano recitals, for late-night video calls during dinners, for the hollow moments where Lila seemed present, yet unreachable. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had overlooked something crucial, but each time he tried to act on it, Clara soothed his doubts with calm logic and practiced empathy. She told him Lila was struggling with grief again. She suggested Megan was overreacting because she disliked being replaced. And when Alexander apologized to her for his distrust, Clara played the role of the forgiving caregiver flawlessly, reinforcing a narrative that made him feel guilty for even questioning her. It was a subtle manipulation, so gentle he didn't notice the walls closing in around him. All the while, Lila drifted further from the safety of the only parent she had left. And then came the night that changed everything. The night the house fell silent, in a way that didn't feel peaceful, but empty. Doors left ajar, a bedroom window unlocked, a stuffed bear lying on the floor where it had never been dropped before. Megan was the first to sense something was wrong, calling Lila's name through the silence. No answer. She searched every room, every corner, before racing to Alexander's office with panic written across his face. They checked the security cameras. They checked the backyard. They checked every inch of the house that had once felt impenetrable. And then reality hit, with the force neither of them would ever forget. Lila wasn't there. Lila was nowhere. The little girl they both cared so deeply for had vanished. Until one night, Lila disappeared. Alexander barely slept that night. Every minute felt wrong, every sound sharper than it should have been. When dawn finally broke, he walked toward Lila's room, expecting to find her curled up with her stuffed bear the way she always did after a difficult day. But the sight that met him froze his breath in his throat. Her bed was empty, covers untouched, pillow cold. The bedroom window was cracked open, letting in a thin stream of morning air. Down the hallway, the back door to the garden stood ajar, swaying slightly as if someone had slipped out not long ago, and on the floor just beside it, shattered into jagged pieces, lay Lila's tablet, the one she used every night before bed. Something inside Alexander broke at the sight of it, and for the first time in years, he dropped to his knees, whispering his daughter's name into a house that refused to answer him. Megan found him moments later, trembling and pale, unable to piece a single clear thought together. She rushed through the home calling Lila's name, hoping desperately this was some kind of misunderstanding, a sleepwalking incident, or a hiding game gone too far. But with every passing second, the truth pressed harder against her chest. Lila was gone. Without hesitation, Megan grabbed the phone and dialed the police, her voice shaking as she explained the situation. Within minutes, patrol cars and detectives arrived, filling the quiet home with footsteps and low murmurs. Alexander tried to explain everything at once, how he found the door open, the broken tablet, the empty bed, but his words tumbled out in fragments. The guilt hit him like a wave. Every warning Megan had given him, every moment he brushed aside, every sign he missed, they all came roaring back. Detective Harris was the kind of man who noticed details before emotions. He scanned the home with a careful eye, his face unreadable but focused. He started with the security room, where monitors should have shown every door, hallway, and corner of the estate. But when he reviewed the footage, his jaw tightened. Every camera from midnight to dawn displayed nothing but black screens. Not scratches, not glitches, deliberately wiped. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Then came the second blow. Officer Ruiz informed Harris that Clara's phone was off and her bedroom was empty. No suitcase, no toothbrush, not even a trace of her presence. She was gone. And when Harris requested her employment file to cross-check her identity, Megan retrieved the folder with shaking hands. Minutes later, the detective returned with a chilling conclusion. Clara's identity was fake, completely fabricated. The name, the references, the documents, none of it belonged to a real person. As the investigation deepened, the situation grew stranger, not clearer. A neighbor down the street reported seeing an unfamiliar white van pulling onto the ward driveway early that morning. Before sunrise, before anyone in the house had stirred, the neighbor assumed it was a delivery, but when shown photos of Clara, he recognized her immediately as the woman who stepped out of the passenger seat. The report added another layer of dread to an already collapsing reality. For weeks, Clara had been preparing something unnoticed. Strange phone calls at odd hours, long walks where she left without Lila, receipts Megan couldn't trace, and now financial patterns that Alexander only realized were suspicious when investigators pointed them out. But even with all this evidence stacking up, one question grew heavier by the minute. Was Clara running from something or running with someone? And was Lila with her at all? The truth no longer felt straightforward. The clues didn't form a full picture, and as Detective Harris closed his notebook, he spoke the question everyone feared hearing. Did Clara kidnap Lila, or did something else happen? Hours into the investigation, just as the weight of uncertainty began to crush everyone in the ward home, Detective Harris returned with a new lead, one that shifted the direction of the entire case. He held a tablet showing footage pulled from a nearby grocery store's security system. The timestamp matched the morning Lila disappeared. The clip began with a busy aisle, shoppers moving through their routines. Then the camera tilted, catching the small figure of a child stepping into the frame. Lila. She looked exhausted, her hair messy, her clothes slightly wrinkled as if she hadn't slept. But what stunned everyone was not her appearance. It was who wasn't with her. Lila was alone. No Clara walking beside her, no hand guiding her. She moved as if searching for something she couldn't name, her breathing shallow, her eyes scanning the store in quiet panic. It was the clearest sign yet that something had broken the pattern everyone feared. Detective Harris paused the footage just as Lila looked up toward the ceiling camera, fear written across her face in a way that struck Alexander harder than any blow he had ever taken. He leaned closer, his hands trembling, whispering his daughter's name into a house that refused to answer him. Megan covered her mouth, realizing what the footage implied. If Lila was alone in the grocery store, then Clara did not bring her inside, which meant either they separated or Clara left her behind deliberately. The idea cut through Alexander like a blade. He had been prepared to hate Clara for taking Lila. Now he was forced to consider a different, more disturbing reality. Why would Clara abandon a child she had gone to such lengths to isolate? Detective Harris began laying out the new timeline, and with every sentence, the air in the room grew heavier.
Clara didn't simply run. She prepared for weeks, transferring small amounts of money, wiping cameras, gaining access to private accounts. But in the final step of her escape, she didn't take Lila with her. She took the money, she erased the evidence, she destroyed the security locks, but she left the little girl behind. The motive made no sense. If her plan revolved around financial theft, kidnapping would have only added to her risk. If she wanted to disappear quietly, leaving Lila unattended in public would have drawn attention immediately. Nothing fit, and that inconsistency made the situation even more alarming. Alexander felt a sinking dread as he realized the question had changed entirely. It wasn't just, where did Clara go? It was, what else was she running from, and what danger had she left behind for Lila to face alone? Detective Harris pressed play again. The footage showed Lila walking down the baking aisle, then stopping abruptly, clutching her backpack to her chest. She looked around as if expecting someone, anyone, to help her. The fear in her posture didn't resemble a child who slipped away accidentally. It resembled a child who fled. Harris pointed out subtle details, the torn strap on her backpack, the faint red mark on her wrist, still visible in the store's fluorescent lights, and the way she kept glancing toward the entrance, as if terrified someone might walk through it. Alexander's breath became shallow. Every instinct he had been too busy to use now roared awake. This wasn't simply a case of a missing child. It was the unraveling of something far more complicated, something Clara didn't want to be part of anymore, and something she tried to escape, even if it meant abandoning Lila. The investigation expanded rapidly, but with each new piece of evidence, the story grew more unsettling instead of clearer. Clara's bank trail ended abruptly at an ATM where she withdrew the last of Alexander's funds. Her fake identity led to dead ends. Her phone remained off. But the single most haunting detail was what Detective Harris found next. Footage of the same white van driving away from the grocery store minutes after Lila entered, without Clara in it. The driver was still unidentified. The van didn't return, and no one could determine whether Clara left the vehicle willingly or whether someone else was involved. That realization struck everyone with chilling clarity. Lila wasn't just abandoned. She might have witnessed something or been caught in the middle of something Clara could no longer control. And the truth would be darker than anyone imagined.
As investigators pieced together the scattered fragments of the case, the weight of uncertainty pressed harder on everyone involved. Alexander sat at the kitchen table where Lila used to draw pictures for him, staring at the grainy grocery store footage that played endlessly in his mind. He kept replaying her expression, frightened, searching, holding back tears she didn't know where to place. That single image drained him more than the long nights, the police interviews, or the empty silence in her bedroom. Detective Harris's team combed through leads, but every answer only opened another question. Clara was gone without a trace. The van vanished from traffic cameras minutes after leaving the store. And Lila, his daughter, his entire world, was out there somewhere, carrying a fear no child should ever have to carry alone. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt hollow. Every quiet corner reminded Alexander of the time he thought he still had. This was no longer just a missing child investigation. It had become a desperate race against the clock no one could see. Megan tried to stay strong, but even she found herself staring at Lila's drawings taped to the refrigerator, wondering how a child who had once filled a home with joy slipped so far from safety without anyone realizing the danger closing in. Detective Harris warned them that leads would grow colder by the hour, especially since Clara's motives no longer aligned with the standard abduction. If she abandoned Lila intentionally, it meant she feared something enough to run, and whatever she feared might now be connected to Lila's disappearance. Alexander felt trapped between guilt and determination, fighting to make sense of a reality he never imagined facing. Yet despite the heartbreak, one truth remained undeniable. He would search every street, every camera, every witness, until he brought his daughter home. And if you're still here, comment, "I'm still watching," or tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how many of you are following this unbelievable story. As detectives dug deeper into Clara's past, the clean image she once presented unraveled into something far more complicated. Phone records showed late-night messages to an unidentified number, messages sent months before she ever stepped into the ward home. It wasn't casual communication, it was pleading. She was being pressured, even threatened. Detective Harris found fragments of conversations that hinted at someone demanding information she couldn't provide, someone who held leverage over her. When investigators cross-referenced Clara's movements with Alexander's old legal files, an unsettling detail resurfaced. A custody dispute from years earlier involving a distant relative who believed Alexander's late wife had concealed vital family information. The case never reached court, but resentment remained buried, unspoken. And now, for the first time, the threads of Clara's secret connections and Alexander's unresolved past intertwined in a way that made every assumption uncertain. Suddenly, Clara wasn't just the villain. She might have been a victim, caught in something larger than anyone realized. While adults scrambled for answers, Leela faced a reality no 10-year-old should ever experience. After leaving the grocery store, she wandered aimlessly until the streets grew colder and the city lights blurred into unfamiliar shapes. She found a narrow alley behind a restaurant where the smell of old bread and sour oil lingered. There, behind a dumpster, she curled up with her backpack as her only pillow. Every sound, footsteps, car doors, distant shouting, made her heart jump. She sifted through trash cans for half-eaten scraps, whispering apologies to her mother each time hunger forced her to eat something she never would have touched at home. When strangers passed too closely, she held her breath and pressed herself against the wall, praying they wouldn't notice her. What kept her moving wasn't bravery. It was the memory of her mother humming lullabies in the kitchen, telling her that whenever she felt lost, she only had to keep walking toward the light. But pain didn't shield her from fear. Her small frame trembled each night as she tried to stay awake long enough to feel safe. She replayed the moment she slipped away from Clara, the argument she overheard, the frightened look on the nanny's face, the way Clara pushed her behind a shelf and whispered, "If anyone asks, you didn't see me. Run, don't look back." Leela didn't understand it then, but she understood enough to flee. She clutched her mother's bracelet, the last gift she had left, and whispered promises that she would get home somehow. Meanwhile, Alexander and the investigators wrestled with the uncomfortable truth that Clara wasn't acting alone. Someone else lurked in the shadows of this story, someone whose motives were still invisible. Every lead pointed toward a larger force, a person who had been watching the Ward family long before Clara ever stepped into their home. And this next part would change everything. Alexander Ward could no longer function in any other part of his life. Meetings blurred together, calls went unanswered. Every waking thought revolved around one question: where was Leela? He announced a $5 million reward for information leading to her safe return, posting it on social media, television, and every news outlet willing to broadcast the message. Tips began pouring in, dozens of them every hour, each one a mix of hope and heartbreak. Some were genuine, some clearly scams. People claimed sightings in other cities, abandoned parks, or near subway stations, each tip leading nowhere. Some tried to trick him with blurred photos, phone calls from strangers pretending to be rescuers, all hoping for a piece of the reward. Every time a lead failed, the weight of guilt and fear deepened, and Alexander felt time slipping past him in a way that no amount of money or power could ever recover. Then late one morning, a single email cut through the noise. It contained a blurry photograph, a small figure crouched on a street corner, holding a cardboard sign. The image was grainy, unclear, but there was something about it Alexander couldn't ignore. He leaned closer, scrutinizing every detail. Then it hit him. The shoes, small, worn, and distinctive, the ones Leela had loved, the ones he remembered buying for her last winter. His heart stopped for a moment, caught between disbelief and hope. Every instinct screamed that it was her. Every memory of her laughter, her quiet bedtime prayers, every moment he'd missed flashed through his mind. Without a second thought, he leapt into his car, tires screaming as he raced toward the location, adrenaline pushing him past traffic, past exhaustion, past fear. Minutes felt like hours as he arrived at the street corner. His heart pounded against his chest as he scanned every corner, every shadow, every passerby. The street seemed empty. The photograph had captured a moment, yes, but the moment had passed. He called out her name, his voice shaking, carried on the wind that stirred the leaves around the sidewalk. Nothing. No laughter, no small footsteps, no backpack moving among the cracks in the pavement. He sank to his knees, eyes scanning the ground, hoping for some sign. Her bracelet, a dropped scarf, anything. And then a chilling realization settled in. She had been there, she had been real, but he had arrived too late. Just as it had been before. The photograph, the tip, the hope, it had vanished as quickly as it appeared. And once again, Alexander's stomach twisted with the same raw, unbearable truth. He was too late. Again. After hours of searching, driven by every ounce of fear, guilt, and hope in his body, Alexander finally spots her. She's on a quieter street now, tucked between a closed storefront and a rusted lamppost. Cold winds bited her cheeks, and her small hands clutched the cardboard sign like it is a lifeline. Please help me get home. Her hair is messy, her coat too thin, and tears streak down her dirty face. She looks up as if sensing something, her eyes wide, scanning the street, hesitant, fearful. And then she sees him. Recognition sparks in her gaze like a match striking the darkness. Her lips part, a small, trembling whisper escapes. "Daddy?" In that moment, time collapses. The world around them, the honking cars, the distant chatter, the city rushing past ceases to exist. There is only her, only him, and the unbearable weight of every lost second dissolving into the reunion. Lila doesn't hesitate. She bolts toward him, tiny legs carrying the exhaustion of days spent surviving alone. Alexander drops everything in his path, opening his arms as she runs into them. When she reaches him, he collapses to his knees under the force of relief and love that had been building for years. Her small body shakes against him, tears soaking into his coat as he holds her tight. He whispers over and over that she is safe now, that he won't ever let go, while she buries her face into his shoulder, finally letting herself cry freely. The city moves around them, indifferent and hurried, but they are invisible, cocooned in a silence that feels sacred. Every second of fear, every pang of guilt, every lost moment melts away in the strength of that embrace. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Alexander allows himself to breathe. The streets no longer feel hostile, the noise no longer unbearable. There is only the warmth of his daughter's arms, the soft sounds of her breathing, and the realization that despite everything, the lies, the deceit, the long days of uncertainty, they have found each other again. Lila's grip on the sign loosens, replaced by her tiny hands holding on to him, unwilling to let go. He whispers her name over and over, as if speaking it aloud will erase all the fear she endured. And in that embrace, standing on a street where strangers pass without noticing the miracle before them, Alexander and Lila finally exist in a moment untouched by the chaos that had stolen so much from them. The reunion is quiet, painful, and beautiful all at once, a perfect collision of fear, love, and relief. Just as Alexander held Lila close, Detective Harris called him aside. The tension in the officer's voice made him step back, heart still hammering from the reunion, dread creeping in once again. Harris revealed what the investigation had uncovered. Clara was not the mastermind. Every carefully orchestrated move she had made, the wiped security cameras, the empty van, the sudden disappearance, had been forced. She had been under pressure, threatened by someone far more powerful, someone who wanted access to Alexander's empire, to the billions he controlled and the secrets only he knew. Clara's deception, her apparent betrayal, had been a desperate act to protect Lila from harm, a shield that had required her to leave the little girl alone for her own safety. Alexander's mind struggled to reconcile the fear he had felt, the anger he had directed, with the truth now laid bare. The revelation came like a tidal wave, washing over him, leaving him trembling. Someone he had trusted in the business world, a partner's whose hand he had shaken countless times, had orchestrated the kidnapping. The man had used Clara as a pawn, threatening her life and forcing her compliance while hiding his own involvement. Lila's nights alone on the streets, the bruises, the terror she endured, had all been collateral damage in a game of greed and power Alexander never imagined existed so close to home. The betrayal stung worse than any physical wound, and yet understanding Clara's motives flipped everything emotionally. The woman he considered a villain was in truth a protector, a figure who risked everything to keep his daughter alive while the real threat remained in the shadows. Alexander
Alexander sank to the curb, holding Lila as the city buzzed around him. Relief collided with rage, love mixed with disbelief. Every moment of fear, every wrong accusation, every sleepless night he had endured, it all suddenly had context. Clara's sacrifice became undeniable. She had abandoned Lila not out of malice, but to protect her from someone more dangerous, someone who knew his weaknesses, someone he had never suspected. And the emotional weight of the revelation was crushing and liberating at the same time. The city lights, the distant traffic, the noise that had once felt unbearable, now all faded into the background as father and daughter held on to each other, realizing the battle was far from simple, but love had endured against everything.
In the weeks that followed, Leela slowly began to recover from the ordeal. Therapy, quiet evenings at home, and the steady presence of her father helped her find a sense of safety she hadn't felt in weeks. She returned to school cautiously, learning to trust again, and small smiles began to appear where fear had once lived. Alexander, watching her heal, realized how much he had taken for granted. The ordinary moments, the laughter, even the simple comfort of bedtime stories. He reshaped his life around her, stepping away from endless boardroom battles and prioritizing the relationship he had almost lost. Every missed recital, every late night at the office, now served as a reminder of what truly mattered. And when Clara was finally located, her story emerged in full. A woman caught in impossible circumstances, forced into actions no parent could forgive or easily understand, yet ultimately humanized by the sacrifice she had made to protect Leela. Justice followed swiftly against the real villain, the partner who had orchestrated the kidnapping. Legal consequences, public exposure, and the unraveling of his schemes brought a measure of closure, though nothing could erase the trauma Leela endured. Alexander focused on rebuilding the trust between himself and his daughter, embracing every moment with her, and ensuring she knew she would never face the world alone again. Nights at the dinner table became laughter-filled again. Evenings were filled with stories, and the simple rituals of life regained their weight. In the quiet moments, Alexander reflected on what had been lost and what had been regained, understanding the fragile nature of love, trust, and security. Money could build empires, but it could not rebuild a broken child. And sometimes, the ones we trust the most are the ones we should fear. What do you think Alexander should have done differently? Let us know in the comments. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps the channel so much. And subscribe for more powerful stories every day.